There's a couple of things that we really wanted to do when we started the development of the game, and that was we really wanted to challenge those assumptions about how the systems in multiplayer have always worked. We have this collective experience now. This is no longer our first rodeo, and we have a lot that we've learned from that along the way. So it was just super important to us to take a hardcore look at those game systems and make sure that we offer the best that we have. In the simplest terms, what we do is allow you to pick 10 pieces of content, and you don't have to take content from a category. So if you don't want a secondary weapon, you don't have to take one. And then you can use that point of the 10 somewhere else, like maybe a grenade that you want. And then there is a special type of content called wildcards. And what wildcards allow you to do is break those traditional creative class rules that you might be familiar with from previous games. An example of a wildcard might be something like perk 1 greed. That lets you take a second perk 1.
We've lost the advantage.
Kill streaks have actually been modified fairly significantly. They're now called score streaks, and there's a couple of things that happen with score streaks. So first off is we changed the system design. So the way that you earn these is by earning score in the game. And what that lets us do is puts a lot of granularity in the system. We can award whatever point total we want for something like a flag grab or a flag capture in the game mode like capture the flag. So you can earn these rewards without actually even killing anybody. That rewards the appropriate gameplay behavior, the gameplay behavior that helps your team win the game mode. On top of that, we've actually changed the score streaks so that they always give you a pretty visceral feedback loop. So even things that are purely controlled by the AI or artificial intelligence in the game, those will talk back to you. That's pretty satisfying. You'll hear the pilot tell you how well he's doing, that he's coming around, that he's getting kills for you. Some score streaks allow you to be either player controlled or AI controlled, and you can actually decide which one you want to be. And then finally, and this one's really fun, is we put a lot of new interaction states. Something like the Hellstorm missile when you're flying it into the ground. Maybe you want to try to burst it early and take out a larger range of players. A little bit of risk-reward gameplay, just a little more depth in that system, a little more connection between you, the player, and that reward. I'm out. So you use a wild card. Those are the rule breakers that you can take. Now this is interesting because here you're using one of these 10 points to get a wild card, but the wild card doesn't actually give you any content. It just lets you modify how that grid works, how you can equip. So by taking something like perk 1 greed, that's how you take 2 perks from the same category. We actually go through a lot of trouble into what we call black boxing. And black boxing is when we keep a lot of data about which perks players are taking and then how well those perks help improve their score. Because score is such a big important part of how the game is balanced now, we actually use score to know if these perks help you over or underperform off your averages. So with that data, we can make sure that having 2 perks in the same category doesn't somehow overpower that particular player. How do we rank players in league play? The answer is pretty simple. At the core of it is whether you win or lose. Now it's a little more involved with that without dealing with the math, but in simple terms, if you're expected to win the game, then you won't get a lot of what we call rank points for that, right? If you're expected to lose and you win, you'll get a little more rank points. And that's how you balance that field over time, because you're constantly trying to put somebody in a match where mathematically you'll win half the time and lose half the time. So it's really as simple as winning and losing. It has nothing to do with kill-death ratio. It has nothing to do with score per minute. It's the purest form of competition, and that's winning or losing the match. In league play, players can access what they want to access, and it's the rawest form of competition, and in a way that isn't just about the top 2% of the players on Earth or the bottom 30% of players on Earth, but for everybody. And when you boil the game down to those really core, simple, I'm winning, we're losing, that makes the game really fun and intense. It's fun to watch, it's fun to be a part of, it's fun to participate in. And all of those things we've had, the game's always been competitive, but never been focused specifically about that purity of competition.
Hostiles have the hard point.
So there's a couple of different things that we're doing with attachments for Call of Duty Black Ops 2. First off, we're going to bring back fan favorites like the reflex sight, of course. But, and this is important, There are no perks that modify guns anymore. If you want to modify a gun, you'll take an attachment. An example of something like that is the laser sight. That's how you increase your hipfire accuracy. That does two things for us. One, you get to visualize this gameplay thing, right? It's not just an icon. It's actually on the gun. You actually get to see the laser sight. You know that someone else has it because you see it on his gun. And that gives you this kind of context for why this guy just mowed you down by spraying you, right? Because he's got a laser sight. But the other side of it is game designers, and allow me to nerd out on you for 2 seconds. The way that this works for us is because they're attachments, I can actually tune them appropriately for the weapon, and this is really important. Whereas if they were just perks, then they have to modify all weapons equally. When they're attachments, they modify the gun. People expect perks to modify you, and they should. They expect attachments to modify guns, and they do. A super competitive player is never going to be purely happy unless he has a battlefield that's a mirrored image of each other. That's a fair point. However, what we've done in custom games is make sure that you can always play game modes from both sides of the battlefield. So let's take Domination, classic Call of Duty game mode. Typically, in a public game, Domination is only played one round. You don't switch sides. But in competition and in league play, you can. And we can set up Domination so you always balance out any kind of intrinsic lack of having a mirrored image map by letting you experience the game from both sides. Our overtime rules in Capture the Flag, same level of treatment. So this competition agenda, right, and the esports initiative has influenced how we think about the game rules, how we think about how you play the time limits, how you have to play both sides, and how overtime or draws work. So it's influencing the game in all sorts of levels. It's absolutely super important that when you're playing the game, period, let alone if you're playing in league play or competition, that we have a really streamlined network experience and keep the latency down as much as humanly possible. It is the internet. I can't control what happens on the other side, but we have a lot of control over what happens with the game and how it runs on a network. And there's been a huge push from the very start, all the way through, and still to this day, to make sure that we keep that experience as tight as humanly possible. The trick with spawning is that you want to spawn players as far away from the action as you can, but not so far away that you have to run back into the battle. So, can you make everybody happy all the time? Absolutely not. It's not a reasonable goal. But what you can do is make sure that the system itself is smart enough to know what's considered bad spawns. And bad spawns for us is very specifically defined. It's defined as saying, hey, I took damage, received damage, killed someone, or was killed within 3 seconds of spawning. That's not a very good spawn point. Find me something else to spawn at. And, you know, there's big games, lots of players, lots of the spawn points can get invalidated. But this system is the best way that we have to keep the game operating in a way that you don't feel like you're just instantly killed when you spawn. Call of Duty Black Ops 2 available on 360, PS3, and PC on November 13th.